In the heart of San Francisco's wealthy Pacific Heights, the Ward estate stood like a marble monument to perfection. Tall white columns, manicured hedges, and windows that gleamed like watchful eyes. Inside, the air smelled of lily and lemon polish, and silence carried more weight than words. Eleanor Ward had built that silence. At 64, the matriarch of Ward Enterprises carried herself like royalty born of discipline, not blood. Her late husband, Charles, had once joked that she could command a room by blinking. Now, as the sole guardian of the Ward fortune and of her only son, Nathan, she used that quiet power to protect what little still mattered to her: legacy, reputation, and family. But lately, Eleanor's confidence had started to crack because of her, Sophie Miller. The first time Eleanor met Sophie, she wanted to like her. The girl was breathtaking. Chestnut curls, soft laughter, a voice that managed to sound both fragile and rehearsed. She had the kind of beauty that could silence a dinner table. Nathan looked at her the way his father once looked at Eleanor, with blind adoration that made reason irrelevant. "She's kind, Mother," Nathan had said over dinner one night, his tone firm but pleading. "She loves me, not the company," Eleanor smiled politely. "Sweetheart, everyone who loves a Ward eventually loves the company." Nathan sighed, used to her precision-cut skepticism. "You don't even know her." Eleanor's voice was soft. "I know what kind of woman survives in rooms like these." Still, she extended an invitation for brunch that Sunday. Sophie accepted, arriving 20 minutes late, but carrying an extravagant bouquet of imported orchids. "Traffic was a nightmare," she said, kissing Eleanor's cheek. "But I would never miss meeting you, Mrs. Ward. Nathan talks about you constantly." That line was rehearsed. Eleanor could feel it, but Nathan melted instantly. Over eggs Benedict and French press coffee, Sophie spoke of philanthropy, yoga retreats, and her simple dreams of starting a charity for children someday. Eleanor smiled, sipping her coffee, watching her son's face glow with devotion. But when Nathan excused himself to take a business call, Sophie's smile changed. It stiffened, sharpened, the kind of smile people wear when they're done pretending. Eleanor didn't speak. She simply watched as Sophie picked at her food, scrolled through her phone, and muttered something under her breath. When Nathan returned, the sweetness returned too, as quickly as a switch being flipped. By the end of that week, Nathan was engaged. The engagement hit Eleanor like a car crash in slow motion. Everyone in the upper circles of San Francisco society began whispering, "Nathan Ward's fiancé, the one who came out of nowhere." Eleanor received messages from old acquaintances, all polite but laced with warning. One stood out. "Eleanor, be careful. I met her in Palm Springs 2 years ago. She was with a different man, older, married. She knows how to play the game." Margaret Hayes. Margaret wasn't prone to gossip. She was sharp, calculated, the kind of woman who only spoke when she knew something for certain. That night, Eleanor sat in her late husband's study, surrounded by his mahogany books and silver-framed memories. She read Margaret's message 3 times, then poured herself a small glass of whiskey. "Charles," she whispered to the portrait above the fireplace, "our boy is walking into something dark." The portrait, as always, said nothing. Over the next weeks, Eleanor observed Sophie quietly. She didn't accuse or confront, she studied. She noticed how Sophie only volunteered for charity when cameras were present, how she corrected Nathan subtly in public, how she called Eleanor darling in that saccharine tone that barely disguised irritation. And yet, Nathan remained blissfully blind. "Mother," he said one evening as they walked through the gardens, "why can't you just be happy for me?" "Because," Eleanor replied, stopping among the roses, "happiness built on deceit never lasts." He frowned. "You're judging her without proof." "Then I'll find proof," she said softly. It was Margaret's idea, half joking over the phone. "You should do what the royals used to do, test her. Find out how she treats those she thinks are beneath her." Eleanor chuckled at first. The image of her, dressed in a maid's uniform, seemed absurd. But that night, as she walked through the kitchen, something about the thought refused to leave her mind. What better way to see someone's soul than from the floor she walks on? By dawn, the decision was made. The transformation was almost poetic. With Alfred's help, her loyal butler for over 3 decades, Eleanor arranged a short vacation to Lake Tahoe, leaving the mansion supposedly under minimal staff. Meanwhile, a new hire named Helen Moore, a middle-aged housemaid from Portland, was added quietly to the domestic roster. No one would suspect a thing. Eleanor's own staff was sworn to secrecy. The disguise was simple but effective: gray wig, thick glasses, plain black shoes, and a uniform that smelled faintly of detergent. Her reflection looked nothing like the woman who graced business magazines a decade ago. "I feel ridiculous," she murmured. "You look humble," Alfred said, suppressing a grin. "A change of scenery might do you good, madam." "Don't madam me for the next week, Alfred." "To you, I'm Helen." "As you wish, Helen." Sophie and Nathan were already living part-time in the mansion, to get used to married life, as Sophie had said. The morning Eleanor arrived in disguise, the estate was buzzing, caterers, florists, and wedding planners moving like bees around their queen. Sophie stood in the foyer, wearing a silk robe and holding a tablet, barking orders. "No, no, the lily go by the staircase. White lily, not yellow. And the champagne wall needs to be ready before noon. Do I have to do everything myself?" Her assistant nodded nervously. When Eleanor stepped through the side entrance, carrying a cleaning bucket, Sophie barely looked up. "Who are you?" "Helen, ma'am." "New housemaid, Mr. Alfred said you needed help this week." Sophie waved a manicured hand dismissively. "Fine, the upstairs guest rooms first. And don't touch the mirrors with those cheap rags. Use microfiber only." "Yes, ma'am." As Eleanor climbed the stairs, she heard Sophie mutter, "God, Alfred's running out of decent help. Where do they even find these people?" Eleanor smiled faintly. Test number 1. Failed in under 5 minutes. The first 2 days were an education. From the corners of rooms and reflections in glass, Eleanor saw things her son never would. Sophie spent hours shopping online, her tone syrupy when Nathan was near, but icy when he wasn't. She belittled staff for small mistakes, a misplaced fork, a fingerprint on glass, always making sure no one of importance saw. Eleanor watched in silence as the woman berated a young gardener for forgetting to water the imported orchids. "Do you have any idea how much those cost?" Sophie hissed. "If one of them dies before the engagement party, so help me." Then Nathan entered the scene, smiling, holding coffee. "Morning, sweetheart." Instantly, Sophie transformed, voice soft, hand grazing his arm, smile luminous. "Oh, darling, I was just explaining to him how delicate orchids can be." The gardener looked at Eleanor, eyes filled with quiet confusion, but she only shook her head. Later that night, Eleanor found the gardener still working, kneeling by the orchids. "They'll die anyway," he muttered. "Too much attention, not enough care." The words stayed with her. By the 4th day, Eleanor began to understand the rhythm of deceit. Sophie's cruelty wasn't explosive. It was methodical, precise, and always aimed at those who couldn't fight back. The cook, a sweet woman named Maribel, confided in Helen one afternoon. "She told me to serve her meal before anyone else's, said rich people digest faster." Eleanor almost laughed, but her stomach twisted instead. Then, one evening, while wiping the kitchen counter, Eleanor overheard something that froze her hand mid-swipe. Sophie was on the phone. Her voice, normally sweet and controlled, was raw and sharp now, the voice of someone stripped of charm. "I told you, Dylan, the old woman's out of the picture. It's just Nathan now. I'll marry him, get the shares transferred, and then we can—" "No, he suspects nothing. He's obsessed. It's pathetic." Eleanor gripped the counter until her knuckles turned white. The blood rushed to her ears. Dylan, the name sounded like poison. Sophie laughed, low and cruel. "Of course I'll dump him eventually. You think I'm going to spend my life pretending to love a corporate robot?" "Please." Eleanor's hand trembled. She wanted to burst out, to scream, to expose her right then and there. But something deeper, something cold and strategic, stopped her. Instead, she quietly stepped back into the shadows, memorizing every word. The next morning, Sophie greeted her with a radiant smile. "Helen, you're early. Be a dear and polish the silver before the tasting event, will you?" Eleanor nodded silently, her heart pounding beneath the plain gray uniform. "You'll have your party, dear," she thought. "And I'll have mine." That night, she met Alfred in the staff quarters. "She's lying to him," Eleanor whispered. "There's another man. She's planning something, a transfer, maybe a prenup loophole." Alfred looked grim. "Should I tell Mr. Nathan?" "Not yet. I want her to reveal herself in front of everyone." "We'll need proof." He nodded slowly. "What's the plan?" Eleanor's lips curved into a thin, determined smile. "The engagement dinner. Let her stage her performance one last time. I'll be watching from the kitchen." She paused, voice trembling between fury and heartbreak. "And when the curtain falls, the mask will come with it." The following morning, Eleanor woke before dawn. The mansion was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant ticking of an antique clock. She sat at the small staff table, coffee in hand, staring through the window at the garden where the orchids gleamed faintly in the fog. She replayed Sophie's words over and over. "He's obsessed. It's pathetic." Her son's face flashed in her mind, the way he smiled when talking about Sophie, the way he defended her against every doubt. The naivety in his eyes pierced her heart like guilt. Eleanor had always taught Nathan to see the best in people. Now that lesson was being used against him. She couldn't simply confront him. He would defend Sophie again, maybe even cut his mother out of his life for interfering. No, this had to be handled with precision, with evidence so undeniable that even blind love couldn't ignore it. She set her cup down and whispered to herself, "This time we play her game." When Alfred entered the kitchen later that morning, she was already waiting. "I need the house's surveillance access," she said quietly. "Every camera, every mic." Alfred hesitated. "Madam, those are Nathan's private systems." "It could. I'm not asking as Eleanor Ward. I'm asking as Helen the maid, who's about to expose a criminal in couture." He looked at her face and realized there was no stopping her. "It will take some time," he said. "Most of the feeds are stored off-site. Then start today." She leaned closer. "And Alfred, make sure no one knows. Not even the staff, especially not Sophie." He nodded. For the next 2 days, Eleanor went about her chores as usual, blending into the background like a shadow. Sophie barely noticed her. That suited her perfectly. It was astonishing how invisible the wealthy could become once dressed in a uniform. People didn't see the help, they saw convenience. It made Sophie's arrogance almost a gift. Each day, Eleanor collected details, the burner phone Sophie kept hidden in her vanity drawer. The meetings she claimed were dress fittings, but took place at a hotel downtown. The coded text she sent at 11:37 p.m., captured briefly on camera when she forgot to tilt her screen away. The words were small but damning. "Soon, he trusts me completely." On the third evening, as the house prepared for a photo shoot, Sophie's temper flared. A florist had delivered the wrong arrangement, pink roses instead of white. Sophie's voice cut through the marble halls like a knife. "Do you think this is a children's party?" I said white. White symbolizes purity, class, elegance. Not cheap romance. The young delivery woman apologized, trembling. "I can go back and..." "You can go back to school, sweetheart, because clearly you don't understand professionalism." Eleanor was polishing silver nearby. She clenched her jaw so tightly it ached. "Ma'am," she said carefully, "the roses are fresh and beautiful." They could still... "Excuse me?" Sophie turned, her eyes narrowing. "Did I ask for your opinion, Helen?" The word came out like an insult. "I'm just saying, enough. Do your job and stay in your lane." The entire room froze. Sophie turned back to her guests, smiling sweetly as though nothing had happened. Now, where were we? Oh yes, the wine pairing. Eleanor lowered her gaze, fury burning in her chest. Not for herself, but for every person Sophie had humiliated. "You'll answer for this," she thought. Not to me, but to truth itself. That night, Alfred entered her small quarters with a flash drive. "It wasn't easy," he said, "but I've extracted footage from the guest suite and kitchen area. There's also audio from her calls on the patio." Eleanor took it with trembling hands. "You're a saint, Alfred. I'm a butler," he said dryly. Which in this house seems to be the same thing. They shared a quiet, exhausted smile. When he left, Eleanor plugged the drive into her laptop, an old discreet device she'd hidden beneath cleaning supplies. For hours, she watched. The footage confirmed everything: Sophie's late-night phone calls, the secret meetings with a man whose voice matched the name Dylan, and the phrases that made Eleanor's skin crawl. "Yes, I've got him wrapped around my finger. We'll be in Europe by summer, once the prenup's rewritten. His mother's harmless. I can handle her. Harmless." The word struck Eleanor like a challenge. By sunrise, she had all the proof she needed. But proof wasn't enough. She needed impact. She needed Sophie to face the humiliation she'd inflicted on others, publicly, irreversibly. And the perfect stage was already set: the engagement dinner. The following morning, Sophie was in rare form, floating through the kitchen in silk pajamas, phone pressed to her ear. "Darling," she cooed, "of course I'm ready. You think I'd let a man like Nathan slip away? He's practically a walking ATM with a heartbeat." Eleanor froze mid-sweep. Sophie laughed, twirling a strand of hair. "And that prenup? Please, I've got to allow your friend who'll make sure I walk away with enough zeros to build a mansion." Her laughter echoed down the hall, light, cruel, confident. Eleanor's pulse pounded in her ears. But before she could move, the front door opened. Nathan stepped in, briefcase in hand, smiling. "Morning, sweetheart." Sophie's tone transformed instantly. "Nate, you're early." He kissed her cheek, oblivious. "Couldn't wait to see you." Eleanor watched from the corner of the room, the scene unfolding like a tragic play. Sophie hugged him tightly, too tightly, her eyes flicking briefly toward the hallway mirror, checking her expression. Eleanor had seen enough. That evening, she met Alfred again in the servants' pantry. "She'll destroy him," she said. Alfred nodded grimly. "What's the plan?" Eleanor took a deep breath. "Tomorrow night, during the dinner, I'll reveal everything, but not with words. With evidence." He frowned. "You'll play the recordings?" "Yes, on the big screen. I want every guest to see who she really is." "That's bold," Alfred said quietly. "Dangerous, even. I've spent my life watching men like my husband, my son, fall for illusions. Not this time." Her voice softened. "She called me harmless, Alfred." His eyes warmed with pride. "Then let's prove her wrong." The next day, the mansion buzzed with activity. Tables were set under chandeliers, crystal glasses lined up like soldiers, and the scent of white lily, the correct ones, filled the air. Sophie oversaw every detail, wearing a gold silk gown that shimmered with each step. To the world, she was radiant. To Eleanor, she was poison in perfume. Nathan looked genuinely happy, oblivious to the storm forming just beyond his sight. As the guests began arriving, investors, family friends, socialites, Eleanor, still in her maid uniform, moved silently among them, placing napkins and adjusting candles. No one noticed her, not even her son, but Alfred did. From across the room, their eyes met briefly, a silent signal. Everything was ready. At 8 sharp, dinner began. Nathan stood to give a speech, thanking everyone for their love and support. Sophie smiled adoringly beside him, her hand resting on his arm. When he raised his glass, she leaned in and whispered something that made him laugh. The crowd applauded. It would have been perfect if Eleanor hadn't been standing by the service doorway, holding the remote. As Nathan lifted his glass again, the chandeliers flickered. The background music stopped. Then, the large flat-screen TV above the fireplace lit up. At first, the room murmured in confusion. Then came the voice, Sophie's voice. "He's obsessed. It's pathetic. I'll marry him, get the shares, and disappear." The sound quality was sharp, clear, undeniable. Sophie froze, her smile dying mid-breath. The crowd went silent. Eleanor stepped forward from the shadows, no longer the maid, no longer Helen, but Eleanor Ward, in full authority. Her disguise gone, her presence commanding the entire room. Every eye turned to her. Nathan's face went pale. "Mother?" he whispered, but she didn't look at him. Her gaze was fixed on Sophie, who was trembling, eyes darting toward the exit. The audio continued, Sophie laughing, mocking, plotting. Then came Dylan's voice. "Once it's done, we'll sell everything. You and me, no more pretending." Nathan's hand dropped to his side. "What is this?" he asked softly, his voice cracking. Eleanor's tone was calm, cold, surgical. "The truth, darling. The truth you refuse to see." Sophie's mask shattered. She stammered, This is insane. It's fake. She's manipulating you." Eleanor took a step forward. "The cameras don't lie, Miss Miller. But you do." Gasps filled the room. The investors, friends, and family watched in stunned silence as Sophie's composure dissolved. She tried to reach for Nathan, tears forming. "Baby, listen to me." He stepped back. "Don't." Her face hardened. "You can't prove anything." Alfred entered quietly, holding a small folder. "Actually, ma'am," he said, "we can." He handed Nathan the printed transcripts and phone logs. Nathan's hands shook as he read. Every line was a wound. Every word a betrayal. The silence that followed was unbearable. Then, Nathan spoke soft, final. "Leave." Sophie blinked, her voice small now. "Nate, please." He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw the steel behind his kindness. "Leave, before I forget who I am." Tears spilled down her face, but no one moved to help. As she turned and stumbled toward the door, Eleanor finally exhaled, not with satisfaction, but with sorrow. She had protected her son, but at a price she hadn't expected, watching the boy she raised lose his innocence forever. When the guests had gone and the house fell silent again, Nathan stood alone in the empty hall. Eleanor approached slowly. "I'm sorry you had to see it this way." He turned, eyes red. "You were right." She shook her head. "I wish I hadn't been." He stared at the ground, voice breaking. "How did you know?" "Because I was you once," she said softly. "And I didn't want you to learn the same lesson the hard way." He took a deep breath. "Thank you, Mom." She smiled faintly. "For what?" "For saving me, even when I didn't want to be saved." That night, as Eleanor sat in her late husband's study once more, she poured a small glass of whiskey and whispered to the portrait above the fireplace. "She's gone, Charles. Our boy's heart is bruised, but it'll heal. He knows now." The portrait, as always, stayed silent. But for the first time in a long time, Eleanor felt something close to peace. Still, she couldn't shake the echo of Sophie's words from her mind, not the cruelty, but the emptiness behind them. How many Sophies are there in this world, she wondered, and how many Nathans will they find? She set down the glass, her reflection trembling faintly in the amber liquid. "Maybe it's time someone taught them how to see," she whispered. And as the clock ticked toward midnight, the house, once again, was silent. By morning, the story was everywhere. The world didn't take long to devour the scandal. "Gold digger exposed at engagement party," read the New York Post. "Ward family humiliation. Caught on tape," screamed another headline. Clips from the dinner, shaky phone footage taken by guests, had flooded every social platform by dawn. The video showed Sophie's perfect smile collapsing into panic as her own voice echoed through the speakers. It became one of those moments that lived forever online, replayed, analyzed, memed, dissected. And though Eleanor hadn't intended for it to go public, she couldn't stop it now. When she stepped into the living room, the television was already playing. Nathan stood frozen in front of the screen, his face pale, his jaw tight. "Turn it off," he said finally, voice hoarse. She reached for the remote, but he stopped her hand. "No, let it play. Maybe I need to hear it again. Maybe I deserve to." The audio looped, Sophie's laughter, her casual cruelty, the phrase that had haunted Eleanor for days. "He's obsessed." "It's pathetic." Nathan sank onto the couch, pressing his palms to his eyes. "God, I was so blind." Eleanor sat beside him. "You were in love." He shook his head. "That's not love. That's worship." I made her a mirror and called it a person. She wanted to say something comforting, but every word felt wrong. So she just sat there in silence, watching her son break quietly, piece by piece. By afternoon, reporters had gathered at the gates. Drones hovered above the property, and deliverymen dropped letters full of exclusive offers from talk shows and networks hungry for the story. Eleanor had Alfred lock the main gate and shut down communication lines. "Nobody gets in," she said. "Not a single one." Inside, Nathan refused to eat. He spent hours in his office, staring at old photos, deleting messages he couldn't bear to read. Every few hours, Eleanor would hear the sound of glass breaking, a reminder that grief wears many masks. That evening, when she brought him tea, he said without looking up, "She called me after the dinner." Eleanor froze. "What?" "She called at 2 in the morning. I didn't answer, but she left a voicemail. Did you listen?" He nodded slowly. She was crying. Said she didn't mean it. Said she panicked. "And you believe her?" He looked at her then, eyes hollow. "I don't know what I believe anymore." Meanwhile, the world had already decided what to believe. Sophie became an overnight villain. Tabloids, podcasts, gossip sites, all fighting for her side of the story. But none of it mattered, because the truth was on video. She was photographed leaving her luxury apartment days later, hiding her face under sunglasses, escorted by a lawyer and a man Eleanor recognized instantly from the recordings, Dylan Pierce. Within weeks, financial investigations revealed that Dylan had multiple bankruptcies and pending fraud suits. The connection between him and Sophie made national news. The same media that had worshipped Sophie as the new face of high society philanthropy now tore her apart with equal enthusiasm. Eleanor should have felt vindicated. Instead, she felt sick. Every cruel headline about Sophie, every image of her crying in public, made Eleanor's chest ache in a way she hadn't expected. Because somewhere between justice and revenge, something human had been lost. Nathan, however, didn't share her guilt. He grew quiet, detached, mechanical, working obsessively, almost punishing himself with productivity. He sold the engagement ring, donated the money to a women's shelter, and cut off all social invitations. When Eleanor tried to talk, he deflected. "It's fine, Mom. I'm fine." But late one night, she heard the sound of a piano coming from the music room. Nathan hadn't played since he was a boy. She walked in softly. He was sitting in the dark, hands frozen over the keys, staring at nothing. "I keep asking myself," he whispered, "what part of me made her think I was easy to fool?" Eleanor walked closer. "It wasn't you, Nathan. It was her." He shook his head. "No. I let her see what she wanted to see. I wanted to be loved so badly that I handed her the script." Tears slipped down his face, quiet and unforced. "Maybe I'm just like Dad, always mistaking control for affection." The words hit Eleanor like a knife. "You are nothing like your father." He looked up. "Aren't I?" "He loved you, but he still lied, didn't he?" Eleanor froze. "Nathan." He turned away. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that." But it was too late. The ghosts of old pain had already filled the room. The next day, Eleanor visited her husband's grave, something she hadn't done in over a year. The wind was cold, the sky a muted gray. She knelt beside the marble stone and whispered, "I thought I was protecting him, Charles. But I think I just taught him to doubt everyone, even himself." The wind answered with silence. She brushed her fingers over the engraved name, feeling the chill of the stone seep into her skin. "I wish you were here," she said softly. "You were better at forgiveness." Weeks passed. The story eventually faded from the headlines, replaced by newer scandals. But the damage lingered. Nathan stopped attending public events. The Ward family name, though not tarnished, carried a strange sympathy, pity disguised as admiration. One morning, Alfred entered the study holding an envelope. "This came for you, madam," hand-delivered. It was from Sophie. Eleanor hesitated before opening it. The handwriting was shaky, almost unfamiliar. "Mrs. Ward, I know you have no reason to read this. I wouldn't either. But please know, I never planned to hurt Nathan as badly as I did. I wanted the comfort, the name, the life. I told myself I'd grow into love, but lies don't grow roots. They rot on leaving the country. Tell him I'm sorry, if you can. Not for what I did, for what I ruined." Eleanor read the letter twice. Then she folded it and locked it in her desk drawer. That night, she didn't tell Nathan. He didn't need to hear her name again. But as she lay in bed, she prayed for Sophie anyway, the first prayer she'd said for her enemy since the beginning. A month later, Eleanor invited Nathan for dinner. The house was quieter now, simpler. No planners, no florists, no photographers. Just the two of them and the smell of roast chicken, the way it used to be. When he arrived, she smiled. "You're thinner." "I've been running," he said. "It helps." They ate in near silence. Halfway through the meal, Eleanor asked, "Do you hate me for what I did?" He looked up, surprised. "What?" "For exposing her that way, publicly." He thought for a long moment. "I hated you that night," he admitted. "I thought you destroyed my life. And now?" He smiled faintly. "Now I realize you saved it. But you also destroyed hers." Eleanor looked down. "She destroyed it herself." "Maybe," he said. "But you pulled the trigger." The words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. That evening, after he left, Eleanor sat in the empty dining room long after the candles burned out. She replayed the confrontation in her mind. Sophie's shock, Nathan's heartbreak, the applause of justice that had felt hollow the moment it ended. For the first time, she wondered if there could have been another way. Maybe she could have warned Nathan privately. Maybe she didn't need to humiliate Sophie. Maybe pride had disguised itself as protection. The thought gnawed at her until she could no longer sit still. She stood, walked to the kitchen, the same kitchen where it had all begun, and whispered, "What did I really save him from? Her deceit or my own reflection?" The clock ticked. The orchids by the window had bloomed again, white and soft, indifferent to human mistakes. One morning, months later, Eleanor found Nathan in the garden, kneeling by the roses. He looked calmer, older, wiser. He said quietly, "Mom, I've been thinking. I want to start something, a foundation. For people who've been deceived, scammed, manipulated, emotionally or financially. You know, people like me." She blinked. "That's a noble idea. I'd name it after you," he said. "The Eleanor Trust." Tears welled in her eyes. "You don't need to." "I do," he interrupted. "Because I finally understand. You weren't trying to destroy anyone. You were trying to save me. Even when I didn't want saving." He smiled softly. "You taught me that truth hurts, but lies kill." Eleanor laughed through her tears. "I suppose I did." He stood and hugged her. "Then let's make something good out of all that pain." Later that year, the Eleanor Trust launched quietly. No press, no gala, no spectacle. Just a small office downtown and a handful of volunteers. Within months, it became a sanctuary for people rebuilding their lives after deception. Nathan ran it full time, and Eleanor visited every Thursday, bringing coffee and cookies for the staff. One afternoon, as she entered the office, she froze. On the wall hung a simple framed photo, a candid shot from years ago. Her, Charles, and little Nathan smiling in front of their old home. Beneath it was a small plaque that read, "The truth sets you free, even when it breaks you first." Eleanor touched the frame, her reflection merging with her younger self. And for the first time since that night in the kitchen, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not pride, not victory, but peace. 2 years later, the Ward mansion no longer carried the echo of scandal. The cameras were gone. The reporters had forgotten. The world had moved on, but inside its quiet halls, something gentler had replaced the tension that once ruled them. Eleanor sat in the conservatory every morning, surrounded by orchids that now bloomed year-round. She had insisted on keeping them, the same flowers Sophie had once screamed about, as a reminder that beauty can still grow out of humiliation. Her hair had turned completely silver, and her steps had grown slower, but her mind was sharp. Age had softened her pride, not her spirit. Nathan visited her almost daily. His foundation, the Eleanor Trust, had grown into something extraordinary, helping not just victims of deception, but people rebuilding after loss, betrayal, and manipulation. It had become a sanctuary for those who had lost faith in love and truth. Every time she read about another family healed, another woman starting over, Eleanor whispered a silent thank you to the pain that had once felt unbearable. That spring, Nathan appeared with someone new. Her name was Isabel Reyes, an artist from Portland, quiet and thoughtful, with kind eyes that carried no hunger for status. Eleanor studied her over dinner, cautious but hopeful. Isabel didn't wear expensive jewelry or designer shoes. She spoke gently, asked more questions than she answered, and laughed with the kind of warmth that reached her eyes. When the evening ended, Eleanor took Nathan aside. "She's not like Sophie," she said softly. Nathan smiled. "I know. I made sure of it." He hesitated, then added, "I wanted to ask your blessing, but not your permission." Eleanor chuckled. "After last time, that's probably wise." They both laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from wounds finally healed. Months later, the wedding was simple. No press, no spectacle, just family, close friends, and sunlight filtering through an old chapel's stained glass windows. Eleanor wore a soft blue dress and held a small bouquet. When Isabel walked down the aisle, she felt tears she hadn't expected sting her eyes. For once, love didn't feel like a transaction or a performance. It felt real, humble, sacred, fragile. During the vows, Nathan's voice trembled. "I used to believe trust was a weakness," he said. "Then I realized it's what makes love possible." Eleanor closed her eyes, letting the words wash over her. They sounded like forgiveness. Time passed gently after that. Eleanor grew older, her body slowing even as her soul deepened. She spent her evenings reading by the window or walking the gardens at sunset, often stopping by the magnolia tree Charles had planted decades ago. Sometimes she imagined him standing there, tall, calm, smiling the way he did when life was still simple. "Do you see them, Charles?" she'd whisper. "He's finally happy." The wind rustled through the leaves like an answer. One autumn afternoon, she received a letter. The envelope was plain, no return address, just her name written in familiar handwriting. She knew it instantly. Sophie. Her heart beat faster as she unfolded the letter. "Mrs. Ward, I don't know if you'll read this, but I hope you do. I live quietly now, far from the noise I once chased. I work at a small bookstore in Italy. People here don't know my name. That's been my salvation. I think of Nathan often, not out of guilt anymore, but gratitude. He taught me that love without truth is just theater. And you taught me that truth without compassion is cruelty. Thank you for both lessons. I've forgiven you." I hope someday you'll forgive me too. Sophie Miller Eleanor sat for a long time, the paper trembling in her hands. Then she smiled, a soft, weary, forgiving smile. She whispered, "You found peace after all." That evening, she showed the letter to Nathan. He read it silently, his face unreadable. When he finished, he folded it and handed it back. "Do you want me to respond?" he asked. Eleanor shook her head. "No, some stories don't need sequels, just closure," he nodded. "Do you forgive her?" Eleanor looked out the window, the sunset painting gold across the orchids. "I think I already did, the moment she stopped pretending. Winter came early that year. Snow dusted the hills, and the house seemed to breathe slower with the season." Eleanor's health began to decline quietly. The doctor said her heart was weak, not surprising for her age, but Nathan refused to accept it. He moved her bedroom downstairs, filled it with books and sunlight. Isabel brought her tea and painted small watercolors to brighten the walls. Even Alfred, older but still loyal, came by daily to check on her. One morning, Eleanor called Nathan to her side. "Promise me something," she said softly. "Anything. When I'm gone, don't build statues. Don't make speeches. Just live well. That's the only legacy worth leaving." He smiled through tears. "You're not going anywhere." But she smiled knowingly. "We all go somewhere eventually. Some just leave light behind when they do." She passed away peacefully 2 weeks later, in her sleep, under the first snowfall of January. Nathan found her with a book open on her chest and a faint smile still on her lips. The book was her favorite, Pride and Prejudice. A note was tucked between its pages. "Forgiveness is not about who deserves it. It's about who needs it to rest." The funeral was intimate. No headlines, no cameras, just the people she loved. Nathan spoke last. His voice was steady, but his eyes glistened. "My mother once pretended to be someone she wasn't," he said softly. "She did it to protect me, and in doing so, she became more honest than anyone I've ever known. She taught me that truth without love is a weapon, and love without truth is blindness. I carry both lessons now, in every choice I make." He paused, glancing toward the orchids placed on her coffin. "She once told me that peace is louder than pride." I finally understand what she meant. The chapel filled with quiet tears. Outside, snow fell gently, like confetti from heaven. Years later, people still spoke of Eleanor Ward, not as a businesswoman, not as the matriarch of wealth, but as the woman who turned scandal into wisdom. Nathan and Isabel expanded the Eleanor Trust into a global initiative, helping thousands rebuild from deception and loss. Every office displayed her portrait, not grand or posed, but candid. Eleanor smiling in her garden, wearing gloves dirtied by soil, not jewels. Beneath each portrait was the same quote, carved in brass: "Truth heals only when spoken with grace." One spring morning, Nathan took his daughter, a bright, curious little girl named Eleanor Grace Ward, to visit the old mansion garden. She ran through the orchids, laughing, her voice ringing like music. "Daddy," she said, "who planted all these flowers?" He knelt beside her. "Your grandmother did. She said beauty should live even where pain once did." The little girl nodded seriously. "Then I'll plant more," he smiled. "She'd like that." As she ran ahead, sunlight danced through the magnolia branches. Nathan looked up at the sky, and for a brief, sacred moment, he swore he could almost hear his mother's voice in the wind. "You did well, my boy. You learned." He closed his eyes, whispered, "Thank you, Mom." The wind answered softly, carrying the scent of orchids. And in that golden garden, time seemed to pause, a mother's love stretching across eternity, whispering peace into the life she had saved.